I never thought a casual afternoon with my granddaughter would turn into the most terrifying moment of my life. Her name is Lily, just 7 years old, bright-eyed and innocent, always curious about everything around her. I adored her. She was the apple of my eye, the little spark of joy in our family. But that day, the sparkle in her eyes was overshadowed by something else, fear. It started innocently. We were sitting in the living room, the autumn sunlight filtering through the curtains, the smell of freshly baked cookies filling the air. Lily was playing with her dolls while I sipped my tea, lost in thoughts of the week's errands. "Mimi," she said softly, her small voice barely above a whisper, "can I tell you something?" I smiled, setting down my cup. "Of course, sweetheart. You can tell me anything." She hesitated, twisting her fingers in her lap. I noticed the tension in her tiny body, the way her eyes darted toward the hallway. Something was wrong. "Lily, what's the matter? Are you scared?" She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I think Mommy is in trouble. She's not being nice to Kevin." My heart lurched. Kevin is my son, Mark's younger brother. I had raised my own children to be honest and respectful, but the idea that someone in my family could be hurting another, especially a child, made my stomach twist. I reached out and took Lily's hands gently. "Sweetheart, what do you mean? Tell me everything," slowly. Her little voice trembled. She hits him sometimes. And she yells a lot, even when he's not doing anything wrong. And last night, I saw her taking money from the cookie jar. She said I couldn't tell anyone. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. My daughter-in-law, Rachel, had always seemed stern, yes, but I had never imagined she could be capable of abuse. The words sank in like icy stones. Lily was telling the truth, and it was worse than I had feared. I hugged her close, whispering soothing words, trying to mask my panic. "Thank you for telling me, Lily. You're very brave. I promise, I'm going to help." For the rest of the afternoon, I couldn't think about anything else. The cookies burned slightly in the oven as I paced the living room, trying to form a plan. How could I confront this? Should I talk to Mark first? Or should I act immediately? My instincts screamed that time was critical. Every hour Kevin spent in that house could be dangerous. I knew Rachel's temper could escalate, and if she sensed suspicion, she might try to cover her tracks. My hands shook as I dialed the local police, rehearsing my words in my mind. I had never had to call them about family before. Never. But there was no choice. The dispatcher answered quickly, calm and professional. I explained the situation, careful to convey the urgency without letting my fear overtake my voice. I gave my address, Mark's address, and described Rachel's behavior as Lily had told me. "Stay with Lily," the dispatcher said. "Officers are on their way. Do not confront anyone in the house. Make sure the children are safe." I ended the call and looked at Lily, whose small hands were clutching my arm. I whispered, "They're coming to help, honey. You're safe now." Even though I tried to remain calm, I couldn't shake the memories of past subtle warning signs, Rachel's sudden anger, her harsh words toward Kevin, the way she seemed to resent the children's laughter. I had written it off as stress, but now it all fit together. The signs had been there all along. Minutes felt like hours as we waited. I kept checking the clock, checking the window, and pacing the room. Every sound outside made me jump. And then I saw the flashing lights through the living room window. Relief and anxiety collided in my chest. The police arrived, and I guided them gently to the situation, explaining everything Lily had told me. I felt a mixture of terror and hope, praying that Kevin was unharmed, praying that Rachel would not lash out. Later, I sat on the porch, watching the officers move in and out of the house. Lily had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted from the stress of telling the truth. I held a blanket over her and whispered promises of protection. I thought about my son, Mark, and how devastated he would be. The betrayal of trust, the fear for his child, it was almost unbearable. Family had always been sacred to me, a foundation of love and safety, and now that foundation felt like it was cracking under the weight of betrayal and fear. When the officers returned with Kevin, unharmed but wide-eyed and trembling, my relief was overwhelming. I hugged him tightly, feeling the smallness of his body and the vulnerability that had always existed but was now magnified by fear. He clung to me, and I whispered, "You're safe now, baby. You're safe." The aftermath was chaotic. Statements were taken, Rachel was questioned, and arrangements were made to ensure the children's safety. I couldn't stop thinking about the moral conflict of the situation, how to reconcile love for family with the need for justice. The decision to involve the police, though terrifying, was necessary. I felt a complicated mix of guilt and righteousness. That night, I sat alone in the dark, staring at the walls of my home, feeling the weight of responsibility heavy on my shoulders. I had protected my grandchildren, yes, but at what cost to the image of family I had cherished for decades? I realized that moral courage often demands confronting truths we wish we could ignore. And sometimes, protecting the innocent means facing the people we love in ways we never imagined. I thought back to Lily, her bravery in speaking the truth despite fear of consequences. I marveled at her courage, her honesty. She had taught me a lesson that day: innocence sees through lies, and the purest hearts often bear the greatest wisdom. If you're feeling the intensity of this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotional family stories and real-life suspense. Stay with me and hit that subscribe button for the next chapter. You won't want to miss how the shocking events unfold. Over the next few days, the legal process began, and the children were placed in safe care. I spent hours talking to Kevin and Lily, trying to reassure them while also grappling with my own emotions. Anger, sorrow, and fear mingled in my chest. I realized that life's harshest lessons often arrive in the most unexpected ways, through the voices of the vulnerable and the courage of the innocent. And yet, through all the chaos, I also saw the resilience of love. Family could survive betrayal if we faced the truth, if we protected each other with courage and compassion. That belief gave me strength as I prepared for what came next. The story was far from over. Rachel's secrets were deeper than I had imagined, and I knew that the next revelations would test every ounce of patience, resolve, and love in my heart. The night ended with a quiet reflection. I held Lily close as she slept, her breathing soft against my chest. I whispered promises of protection, of justice, and of unwavering love. In the dark, I understood something profound. Sometimes, the bravest act is to face the darkness, even within our own family, and to fight for those who cannot defend themselves. If this part touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps us bring more real-life emotional stories to you. And remember, the truth, no matter how painful, is always worth uncovering. The days following the police intervention were tense and surreal. Kevin and Lily were safe, but the house felt empty and heavy, haunted by the knowledge of what had been happening behind closed doors. I found myself replaying Lily's words over and over in my mind, every detail etched into my memory. Rachel's betrayal, the hidden abuse, the lies, it all weighed on me like a storm cloud I couldn't shake. I spent hours at the police station, answering questions, giving statements, and helping investigators piece together the truth. Yet, despite the official procedures, the emotional turmoil stayed with me. I could not stop thinking about how a family could hide so much darkness in plain sight. The home that once felt like a sanctuary had become a landscape of fear and deception. At home, I tried to create a sense of normalcy for the children. I cooked their favorite meals, read bedtime stories, and sat with them in the evenings, trying to provide comfort. But Lily, despite her bravery, was haunted by memories she barely understood. One evening, she looked at me with wide, tear-filled eyes. "Mimi, will she come back? Mommy." I held her close, brushing her hair from her forehead. "No, sweetheart. The police will make sure you and Kevin are safe. You don't have to be scared anymore." Even as I comforted her, I realized the truth of the situation was far more complicated. Rachel wasn't just a threat to the children, she was a person who had been living a double life, hiding anger, secrecy, and manipulation behind a mask of civility. Understanding this complexity was terrifying, and yet I knew I had to face it. A week later, the police called me with updates. They had discovered a deeper pattern in Rachel's behavior: financial manipulation, emotional abuse, and evidence that pointed to potential long-term harm. My heart sank. The full extent of her actions was far more calculated than I had realized. That night, I sat in the living room with Kevin and Lily asleep upstairs. I tried to process the growing list of revelations. Rachel's cruelty had extended beyond the children, her manipulation had subtly affected everyone around her. I remembered moments in family gatherings when her words had stung my son Mark, when subtle threats had been made behind smiles. I had missed all of it. The next morning, I received a call from the school counselor. Lily had confided in her, and the counselor confirmed the abuse. Kevin, too, had been struggling silently, hiding bruises and fear behind forced smiles. The realization hit me like a punch in the chest. These innocent children had been carrying a burden no child should ever bear. Determined to protect them fully, I began documenting everything. Every conversation, every observation, every memory. I wanted to ensure that if Rachel tried to minimize her actions or twist the story, the truth would stand clear. But as I compiled the evidence, I also felt a creeping sense of dread. Rachel's cunning nature meant she could try to interfere at any moment. Her manipulations had always been subtle, and I had to anticipate her next move. One evening, as I reviewed notes, Lily came running into the room, clutching her favorite stuffed bunny. "Mimi, I remember something else," she said, voice quivering. "Last week, Mommy took my allowance and told me I couldn't tell anyone. And she said if I did, she'd be very angry. Really angry." I felt my stomach twist. This wasn't just verbal intimidation, it was control and coercion, reinforcing fear to keep the children silent. I hugged her tightly, whispering reassurances, and made a decision that night. I would not only protect them emotionally but take every step to ensure they could never be trapped in this situation again. The following day, I spoke with the detectives assigned to the case. I shared Lily's new revelations, and together we discussed next steps: restraining orders, protective custody, and counseling for the children. I realized that this was more than a legal battle, it was a moral one. Every decision carried weight. Every action could impact the children's future. That evening, after the children were asleep, I sat in the living room, reflecting on the moral complexities of what had transpired. I had always believed that family meant unconditional trust, but Rachel's betrayal had forced me to confront a harsher reality: love is not blind. Protecting those you cherish sometimes means making the hardest choices, confronting darkness, and standing firm against deception. Despite the fear and grief, I also felt a sense of empowerment. I had acted, I had intervened, and I had listened when a child's voice revealed the truth. I had discovered that courage isn't only about confronting danger head-on, it's about recognizing the right moment to act and having the wisdom to do what must be done. A few days later, the police informed me that Rachel had been taken into custody. The relief was immense, yet bittersweet. The legal battle was far from over, but the immediate danger had passed. I felt a strange mix of victory and sorrow. My son would be heartbroken, the children scarred by trauma, yet they were safe, and that was the priority. Sitting in the quiet of the evening, I reflected on the lessons of the past week. I had learned that innocence often carries courage beyond its years, that betrayal can come from the most unexpected places, and that moral responsibility sometimes requires taking action against those you love to protect those who cannot protect themselves. If you're feeling this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life family suspense stories. Stay with me and hit that subscribe button for the next chapter. You won't want to miss how the final revelations unfold. As the nights passed, Kevin and Lily slowly began to heal. We spent evenings talking, playing games, and creating a safe space filled with love. Their laughter, once stifled by fear, began to return. And through it all, I realized something profound: resilience isn't about forgetting pain, but about finding strength in the face of it, about creating safety and hope when darkness threatens to overwhelm. Yet, even with Rachel in custody, I knew the story wasn't over. Secrets ran deep, and questions remained. How had she hidden her true nature so well? Were there more manipulations we hadn't discovered? And perhaps most frightening of all, what would happen if she ever tried to return? I spent that night staring at the ceiling, contemplating the fragility of trust and the resilience of love. I whispered a prayer for the children, for my family, and for the strength to continue protecting them. I understood now that family, at its core, is not defined by appearances or words, but by actions, the courage to stand up when it matters most, the willingness to confront danger for the sake of those you love. As I closed my eyes, exhausted but resolute, I knew one thing with certainty: no matter the shadows that lingered, I would fight for the light, for Kevin and Lily, and for the truth that no one should ever be afraid to reveal. If this part touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps us bring more emotional family stories and suspenseful real-life narratives to you. Remember, the courage of a child's voice can change everything. The days following Rachel's arrest were a mixture of relief and tension. Kevin and Lily were safe, but the echoes of the past weeks lingered in our home. I watched them cautiously, making sure every laugh, every movement was genuine, not a mask hiding fear. I knew that healing was not instant, that trauma leaves traces even when danger has passed. I spent long hours with Lily, talking about courage, honesty, and the strength it takes to speak the truth. "Mimi," she whispered one evening, clutching my hand, "I was scared, but I knew you would help us." Her words brought tears to my eyes. "You were very brave, Lily. Never forget that. Courage isn't about not being afraid, it's about doing what's right, even when you are." But the story was far from over. The police called with updates about Rachel's case. Their investigation uncovered more than just emotional abuse. They found financial manipulation, intimidation tactics, and evidence of prolonged harassment aimed at controlling and isolating the children. It became clear that the danger had been deeper than any of us had imagined. One afternoon, Mark came over, his face pale but resolute. He had flown in from work as soon as he heard what happened. Seeing him with Kevin and Lily, I felt both relief and sorrow. His voice trembled as he said, "I can't believe this. How could she do this to our kids?" I hugged him tightly. "Mark, the important thing is they're safe now. That's what matters. Everything else can be dealt with." As the legal proceedings progressed, we worked closely with counselors to ensure the children's emotional well-being. I watched as Lily slowly regained her confidence, her laughter returning in small, fragile bursts. Kevin, too, showed signs of relief, though I could tell the experience had left its mark. I promised myself I would protect them fiercely, that no one would ever have the power to make them feel unsafe again. Then came the day when Rachel's true extent of control was revealed. Through her manipulations, she had managed to isolate Mark from family members, distort financial accounts, and even threaten certain neighbors to keep them silent. The scope of her deception was staggering, and it made me realize how close we had been to even worse consequences. I sat with the children that evening, holding them close. "You see, my darlings," I whispered, "sometimes people hide behind smiles and kind words. But the truth always comes out, and we always have the power to protect ourselves and each other." Mark, sitting beside us, nodded solemnly. "I wish I had seen it sooner," he said quietly. "I wish I had protected you all better." I took his hand. "You've done what you could, Mark. The important thing is that we're here, together, and we're moving forward. That's what counts." The courtroom proceedings were long and emotionally taxing. I sat through them with Lily and Kevin, watching Rachel deny, deflect, and manipulate even in the presence of evidence. It was painful to witness, but I reminded myself constantly why we were there: to protect the children, to ensure justice, and to break the cycle of fear. Finally, the verdict came. Rachel was convicted on multiple charges, including child endangerment, emotional abuse, and financial manipulation. Relief washed over me like a tidal wave. The children were safe, the family could begin to heal, and the truth had prevailed. In the quiet aftermath, I reflected on everything we had endured. The weeks of fear, the sleepless nights, the moral conflict of confronting a loved one, all of it had brought lessons I would never forget. Courage isn't always grandiose, it's in the small, difficult acts: listening to a child, believing their words, taking action when fear tempts us to remain silent. I spent that night sitting in the living room, Kevin and Lily asleep upstairs, and Mark beside me. I whispered a silent prayer of gratitude. The ordeal had changed us all, but it had also strengthened our bond. We had faced darkness and emerged with a renewed understanding of love, trust, and responsibility. Over the following months, The children slowly healed. Therapy, love, and stability nurtured their resilience. I watched as Lily rediscovered her playful spirit, and Kevin found confidence in safety. We laughed again in our home, a sound that had been absent for far too long. Looking back, I realized the greatest lesson of all: sometimes the people we love most can hurt us, whether intentionally or through hidden darkness. But facing that truth, protecting those who cannot defend themselves, and refusing to let fear dictate our actions, that is where true courage lies. If this story has touched you, please like, share, and subscribe for more emotional family stories and suspenseful real-life tales. Remember, the voice of a child can reveal truths we may never expect, and taking action can save lives. Even as life returned to normal, I promised myself one thing: I would never ignore the small voices of fear, pain, or courage in my family again. I had learned to listen, to trust instincts, and to act decisively. And in doing so, I had not only saved my grandchildren but strengthened the bonds of family in a way nothing else could. The house felt lighter now, filled with laughter, warmth, and the comfort of safety. But I carried with me the memory of those tense days, the bravery of my granddaughter, and the moral responsibility we all bear to protect the innocent. It was a reminder that sometimes love requires action, courage demands confrontation, and truth, though frightening, will always prevail. If this final part moved your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us continue sharing real-life stories that inspire, warn, and uplift. Stay vigilant, love fiercely, and always protect those who cannot protect themselves.